All right, so let's get started. While we wait for others, I wouldn't mind going over some housekeeping. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining GBRI's Well AP Exam Prep Kickoff meeting. For those of you who are not familiar with GBRI, we are a small business, privately owned, online gamified platform, a sustainability and social impact education platform with a mission to make sustainability resources affordable and accessible to everyone across the globe. On the screen now, you're looking at some of our education partners. We are a USGBC education partner for the last 14 years, an AIA education provider, and education partners for some other organizations, including the UN, the Collaborative for High Performance Schools, and the Rhode Island Energy Efficiency Council. We truly believe a sustainable future must also be an equitable one, where every human is treated equally and fairly. Our mission is to make sustainability, health, and wellness available and affordable to everyone around the world. All right, so let's get started with today's meeting. This is week 1 of our Well AP version 2 exam preparation. Some of you may have already signed up. Thank you for that. And some of you may be testing it. So that's also even better. So I hope you get to make a decision after today's session. Here on the screen, you're looking at our GBRI Well team. On the left-hand side, it's me, even though I know that picture on there doesn't look like the one you see on the screen. I am Jeslin Varghese. I am a Well faculty, a lead AP, and a few other credentials related to sustainability. I am also the founder of GBRI. I right now support a few functions, including in GBRI and also in New York City. I work at the MTA as a consultant on project controls. We also have Carolina and Doug. Carolina is a Well AP. She is an architect currently working as a sustainability consultant for Contact Workplaces. She has been helping GBRI with a Well AP exam prep. Doug and Carolina both were students of GBRI at one point, and now they are teaching Well AP exam prep. I'm very excited about it. They're doing a wonderful job. Carolina is based in Houston. She moved from Argentina recently to Houston. She's also a lead AP. She uses her lead credential and Well credential to guide her clients on sustainability consulting. For the past year, she has participated in 5 projects in Latin America. She continues to work on many projects in the region. Doug is also a Well AP and Well faculty. Doug is a civil engineer. He's also a consultant. He's also a PhD holder, a professor. He has worked in more than 50 countries and 5 continents. Doug has a bunch of certifications and licenses, including EIT, PG, a Well AP, Well faculty, AP and associate. Doug absolutely uses them all on his projects, for his clients, teaching, and it's a pleasure to have him on board on GBRI to teach well. And also we were talking about how we can utilize all the skills to provide well consulting services. Ala, who's not here on the call today, she is our Well AP from Dubai. She was also one of our students. She's an architect. She's also an artist, and she was there in our session yesterday. She's also a lead green associate. So I want to thank each of our instructors before getting started with today's session. All right, so let's see how many people do we have now, Felicia? Do we have everyone that we were hoping for?
No, we're still missing some. We have 3 of the folks.
Okay, it's okay. So let's get started then. I hope we'll watch the recording. So here is the agenda. What we have today is, first thing is 10 things you should know about the Well AP exam preparation under the version 2. Followed by, we'll talk about how to get started in our study group. And then, of course, I think the number 3, meet your instructors, I already introduced you. And then number 4 is getting started with Well certification, which will be taught by Doug. And then he will conclude the session with homework and what's next. Right. So I'm assuming we don't need an introduction to well building standard. Many of you may already be familiar with some of it, but just want to give you a high level, introduction to well. Launched in 2014, well building standard has come a long way with presence in more than 100 countries. Well building standard is about advancing occupant health in the places where we spend majority of our lives. It is applicable to office buildings, stadiums, hotels, schools, and hospitals. Well also complements green building rating systems such as LEED and BREEAM. There is a study done by the World Green Building Council. It's called Building the Business Case, Health, Well-Being, and Productivity in Green Offices. It cites both well and LEED. I would highly encourage you to look at it. So if there is a link, I can share it in the chat after I'm done with the slides. All right. Next slide, please. All right. So we are excited that you have chosen to pursue the WELL AP exam credential. Now that we are on the same page about what the WELL building standard is, let's look at the 10 things you should know about the WELL AP exam. Number one, what exactly is the WELL AP credential? A WELL AP credential is someone who has expertise in the WELL building standard, inside out, someone who has commitment to creating spaces that advance health and well-being, someone who can guide teams, navigate teams successfully through WELL certification process. Just like a lead AP, this is someone who has all the knowledge that requires to help a project become successfully certified under the WELL rating system. Now, what are the eligibility to become a WELL AP? Is there any eligibility to appear for the exam? As such, there is no other eligibility except age. So you have to be at least 18 years or older. Even though they recommend WELL project experience, it is not a requirement. How much does it cost to take the WELL AP exam? It costs $299 if you are a working professional or $99 for students. So if you are a student in some capacity, I highly encourage you to take advantage of it. Here is a slide that was shared by IWPI a few months ago when they joined for one of these sessions. This is a slide that shows if you have offices, small or big, and if you plan to take the exam as a group, then they offer group discounts that you see here. What is the WELL AP exam format? I'm sure many of you have taken the GRE and the SAT exam. It's all computer-based. Similarly, WELL AP is also a computer-based exam. You take the exam in a Prometric center near you. And these days, I know after pandemic, we have all started working from home. And so has Prometric centers. They are offering this program where you can test anywhere, anytime with Pro Proctor, where you can take the exam from the comfort of your home or own homes. It sounds exciting, but what I heard from people who have taken this option a few months ago, that it was not as seamless as they thought it would be. So if you are looking at this option, I encourage you to check the link, the Pro Proctor link, to make sure you have the available technology, good internet bandwidth, everything before you sign up. The exam is also, it's 2.5 hours. Each question is multiple choice, and there are 115 questions, out of which some of them are not scored. Some of them are scored, some of them are not scored. 15 questions are not scored, and you would not know which questions are not scored. It's spread out throughout the exam. The primary language for the exam is English. You will see the answer options on screen. You mark them as you make progress. You can always mark them. If you are not sure about an answer, you can flag them, and then you can come back and revisit the questions you have flagged before submitting all your answer choices. You would need 170 to pass the exam. It's scored between 125 and 200. All our students, I would probably say 90% and more of our students have scored more than 180, some of them even 190 plus. So far, we have 100% pass rate that we guarantee that if you follow our roadmap, you will pass the Well AP exam in flying colors. All right. So what are Well AP exam reference documents? So what is the exam based on? So this is the most important piece. Basically, if you are planning to study on your own, these are the three guides you should look at, and all three are available for free on the IWPI website, but the version is very important. Well Building Standard version 2 with Q4, which is Q4 2020 addenda. This is the guide you would need. And note there are beta features in the guide, but they are not assessed for the exam. So that's one. Second is the Well Certification Guidebook, which is also Q3, Q4 2020 addenda. The last one is Well Portfolio Guidebook. So if you look at it, they're all 2020 version. Okay, so if you go online now and you search for Well version 2, you'll find the latest version, which is great. But for the exam, you should understand the exam questions were based on Q4 2020 addenda. All right. So what are well knowledge domains? So now that we understand what is the exam based on, what is that you have to study? Knowledge domains reflect well building standards, concepts, and certification process. There are a total of 10 concepts and one additional certification process, making 11 knowledge domains you see on the screen now. So in a few minutes, Doug is going to walk you through well certification, where you will know about each of these core concepts. But what I would like you to understand is each of these concepts you can expect following number of questions that you see here. Like for example, 11 questions you can expect from the air knowledge domain, 9 from water, and so on. So as you can see here, that 12 questions that you can expect from well certification, which Doug is going to cover today. What are Well AP exam question types? So this is basically telling you at what level you are being tested. So there are 3 levels. One is recall, one is application, and one is analysis. And what is the difference? Recall items, these items assess your ability to recall factual material from the guide or foundational knowledge, which is presented in a similar context to exam references that I showed you a few slides ago. Second is application, where you are given a novel problem or scenario to solve, where you apply some of the things that you learn from the knowledge. Okay. Third one is analysis, where you break the problem down into further components to create a solution. So basically, it is not something where you study and you are only testing your memorization. It is not. It is beyond that. It is mostly on recalling, which is definitely some memory, and second is applying it, and then third is an analysis, where you're given project scenario. So that brings us to the next one, project scenario for Well AP exam. So if you remember, I mentioned project experience is not a requirement for Well AP to sit for the Well AP exam. However, there will be questions based on project-based scenario. So what does it actually mean? So if you're familiar with reading comprehension questions on SAT or GRE exams, they give you a small comprehension passage, right? It could be like 300 words comprehension passage, and then they'll ask 3 or 4 questions based on that comprehension passage. It could be once upon a time, so-and-so was doing this and this and this, and then they'll ask you, what was Jack doing or what was Jill doing? So I'm just giving an example. Similarly, here they'll give you a project scenario. A project in Houston is pursuing well certification. They are pursuing well credits A, B, and C, and they have these strategies, or that will be the story. And so that is a story given to you. This is a scenario. Now you have a scenario to answer a few questions based on the scenario. So basically you are using your knowledge of the well building standard and then applying in the context of a project. Next is what is embedded content. So this is something relatively new in the testing world, at least for well and lead exams. So what they're trying to do here is sharing some content from the well guide and making it available for test takers during the exam. So this way you can conserve some of the energy in your brain from not having to worry about memorizing all the concepts. So as I showed you, there are 11 knowledge domains. Out of the 11 knowledge domains, 10 of them are well concepts like air, water, and air, water, nourishment. Each of the concepts have multiple preconditions and optimizations. So just looking at one of them on here, the first one, you don't have to memorize it. You'll be all given this sheet where you can see each and every single of them. When I say sheet is a PDF element, it is actually online. So imagine on the screen, you are taking the test and your left-hand side will be a button which says embedded content. The moment you click it, the PDF will open up. Within the PDF, you'll have access to the well concepts. You'll also have some table that displays some thresholds. And these thresholds, right now, you may not know what that means, but as you make progress in the exam prep, you will understand. So for instance, under the air concept or particular preconditions and optimizations, projects are required to test air quality for particulate matter or different quality elements for water. And some of those things have so many numbers. So instead of having to worry about which one is what, they have given the table that way you don't have to worry about memorizing them. And finally, the scoring and certification levels, like how many points you need to get to silver, gold, or platinum, you don't have to worry about that. So this is what I think a useful feature where it's almost like a semi-open book, sort of like a few pages, and which pages are included, you will get to know. So when you have, if you have after today's session, you'll have access to our materials, wherein we'll tell you which pages exactly would be there in embedded content. That way you can mark off that from your, or you can use that your mental resources for other things. All right. Last. Now that you know what well building standard is, who a well AP is, what are the requirements, eligibility and everything, is the well AP credential right for me? This is something that we all ask ourselves when we come across a new credential. Now the answer is it completely depends on where we are with our lives. As you can see here, it is not constrained to one profession. Anyone who has a passion for health and wellness can pursue it, be it urban planners, engineers, architects, professors. As you can see from our own team here, we all have a diverse team and we all pursue different things, but still we are well AP professionals. If you consider yourself as a leader in your industry or in your organization and you're committed to placing health and wellness of your occupants at the center of performance, then well AP credential may be a right fit for you. Just like a lead AP credential, it's a tool where you get to apply lessons learned from it on all your projects. It'll also help you stand out if you're looking for more opportunities in the industry. Now, if you want to look at the market side of things, the global health and wellness industry.
Jeslin, we lost your audio. Nope. Jeslin?
Felicia, can you still hear me?
We can hear you now. Yes.
Oh, perfect. All right. So did it drop for a second?
Yes, at the beginning of this slide, if you could just start from the beginning.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So if you are interested in looking at the business side of things, the global health and wellness industry is a $4.2 trillion market. So this shows the tremendous amount of opportunities you may have once you earn, a well AP credential. Now, it all depends on your current credentials, along with your experience, your expertise, and your passion. So there's so many opportunities out there. So I don't want to mislead you by saying, okay, it's a 4.2 trillion market for well APs out there. That is the global health and wellness industry, which means hospitality, hotels, hospitals, office spaces. They all have some level of wellness inbuilt in their program and performance, and there are opportunities for many roles. Okay, all right. So that concludes the first session. The next, we already talked about the what you call the instructors. Now I want to show something about what is included in GBRI exam prep resources. So the first one is the core component. The core component is the one that you all have access to. These are well-building standard, the version 2, 2020 addenda and everything. And then on top of that, on the right-hand side, you see what GBRI offers. Well AP live sessions, just like this. You'll have instructors like Doug, Carolina, Ala, me, Felicia, guide you through the process. Along with that, you get access to 400 plus practice questions that come from that represent each of those knowledge domains we talked about. On top of that, you get access to 3 simulated mock exams. And plus, last but not least, you have a social study group on WhatsApp where you are constantly encouraged to keep up with the requirements and study. You have, we call it like a study buddies, and where we all are always there to answer any questions. So you may be familiar with the WhatsApp social app. So we just use that to create a group where we chat with students. You'll find students who have their well credential. They continue to support others. So you will see motivational, like somebody will say, oh, I just take my exam, I got passed, so that'll give you inspiration. Somebody may say, I'm finding it difficult to study this, can you help? So it's a good methodology to stay motivated while you are on the course. Well AP Learner resources, these are resources available to you on the IWBI website. One is get to know the new Well AP exam. Basically, I covered most of it today in the 10 things, but you can, of course, look at it to see what other things are there. So what is GBRI's exam prep methodology? So as you remember, I mentioned about project experience or project scenario. So that is something that we use on our project. Doug, as clearly, as you can see, Doug and Carolina are both industry professionals. So definitely they bring in their industry experience when they teach these topics. We also talk about everything that you need to pass the exam, including verification methods, the well core guidance, and of course the well practice questions and the well mock exams. So together, it's a package where we use all the elements from the well core guide along with well certification and in the context of a project. So remember I mentioned about the project scenario questions. To answer those things, what we have done is we use our own project to teach well concepts. So on the screen now, you're looking at a community center, a future community center for GBRI in New York City. This is designed by one of our students from ISP, International Sustainability Program, looking at different renderings here. So this is something that you will be using throughout our exam prep to teach you concepts. So this is a wonderful way to learn concepts. So this will stay in your head. That way you can relate to, when you learn a concept, you can say, how can I apply this to a project? So right away after taking the exam, exam prep, you would then know you can remember certain concept and also you can apply that in your everyday life or your projects. So here is actually a 6-week. So basically our program is a 6-week exam prep session. In every week, we will cover following topics. You can see over here. And also you can see some reviews from some of our past students and professional USGBC reviewers on our exam prep content. So this is the roadmap. It's a 6-week roadmap. Week 1 is first becoming familiar with the Well AP exam and well certification and joining the WhatsApp group. Week 2 is air and water concepts, followed by practice questions. So every week is a 1 or 2 concepts and then practice questions. So every week you're making progress. And if you're following the 6th week along with studying with the group and on WhatsApp, you are guaranteed to pass. And the last 6th week is when you take the last practice questions and the mock exam. Now, if you complete all our exam prep materials in 6 weeks or even in more than that, if you complete it, you will also earn our GBRI Wellness Ambassador badge. It's a socially shareable badge. You can share it on LinkedIn, which could be again seen as one additional certification for potential employers. All right, so this I already went through our wonderful instructors. And once again, I want to thank them for their continued support. Here are some of our students who took our exam early on. This was when the beta version, and they passed the exam, and also they continue to help make our program even more, continue to make the exam prep even better. Also, congrats to some of our students like Muskan, who got scholarship, and she got, you can see, 192 out of 200 for on her Wernicke exam. Some other testimonials here from many of our students across the US, across the world. Kelly from JLL, Ala, who's our WellAP instructor now in Dubai, and Elizabeth, and then many more you will see online and on LinkedIn. So now if you are interested and if you are on the journey, here's a quick roadmap, a high level that shows the different steps. Register on IWBI and make a payment if you want to take the exam prep. I mean, if you wanted to schedule the exam, prepare, schedule, take the exam, and celebrate your achievement. So now, if you are joining today's session as a test, I wish you good luck to continue your journey, and I hope you return to take all the 5 sessions. With this, I also would like to hand over the rest of the slide deck to Doug.
Thank you, Jeslin. Thank you very much. That was a great overview. Thank you very much, Jeslin. Welcome, Allison, Ben, Yvette, Manuela, and my colleagues, Felicia and Carolina. Were there any questions before I go into the next section about the 10 things you should know, or any questions on Jeslin's slide content or any of the material he covered? This would be a good time to ask a question. No questions? Okay, let me then share my screen. So I'm going to pull up my slide deck, and I will share my screen with all attendees. And so Felicia, let me know if you're seeing.
As soon as I see something. So we are seeing your desktop window.
Okay, so
is that your son?
It is my son, yeah. Do you see the slides now?
We do see the slides now, yeah.
So you got to
Good
see my
guy.
son. Okay, there we go. Okay. Right, we're out enjoying nature on a sailboat.
We are live here.
Yes.
This is supposed to happen.
Oh, great.
Otherwise, you get bored.
Okay, excellent. All right. So what I have highlighted here is the WELL certification concept, which is really not a concept because the other 10 concepts are the knowledge domains, but you do need to understand and know the process of WELL certification. So before we talk about that, let me go back a slide. You'll notice that each of the concepts here has a number next to it: air 11, water 9, nourishment 10, and so on and so forth. That is the number of questions that you can expect on the exam from each of those concepts and knowledge domains. So you'll notice that WELL certification has the most, and that's 12. So that's why we thought it would be important to get this under discussion right away. And you can expect 12 questions on the exam from the WELL certification knowledge domain. There are a couple of points in the chat. Maybe we can address that, and also okay, excellent, very good. I don't think it's a question at this point, but what I'd like to say is that if there are questions, you can feel free to type them in the chat while I'm presenting, and my team, for as long as they're able, may be able to answer it immediately. If it's something we have to do a little bit of thought or research on, we'll get back to you on that as quickly as we can. But I think it would be best, rather than stopping the presentation throughout to address questions, is to save questions for the end. But if something is confusing, and I hope it's not, or if something needs immediate clarification, then please type it in the chat, and the team will try to address that while I'm presenting, or I will address it at the end of the presentation. Okay. All right, so we have 11 knowledge domains, 10 concepts, and then well certification. We're going to start with well certification first. So the next slide that you should see is getting started. Can you see getting started?
We can, yes.
Okay, so good, we're off and running. All right, so listed here are the specific topics under well certification that you're expected to know in terms of knowledge and skills for the exam. We'll cover all of these in our session today, except the highlighted texts, which you will learn throughout the remaining weeks of our training session as they touch on multiple knowledge domains. So there are some synergies between, as you can see, number 7, between different knowledge domains that are important to understand before you sit for the exam. Okay, if you think about it, mastering the topics under the knowledge subheading, which you see knowledge of, allows one to answer the what and whys and provides a stepping stone to how to implement the knowledge you've learned under the skills subheading. Under the skills subheading, we will learn how to perform specific tasks applicable to well projects pursuing well certification. So I'm not going to go over each of these, but it's important that you do have the knowledge that is listed 1 through 6, and 7 and 8 can be discussed in future sessions, and then the skills 1 through 5 that are listed here. All right, we had seen a project that Jeslin showed you, which is the GBRI Community Center in New York, the planned project. And the reason we show you that is because this is a learning tool for you. You will have a project scenario on your exam, and you will be given a project scenario. The project could be located not necessarily in New York City, but it could be located anywhere in the world. And you'll be given a few paragraphs to read about the project and what the intent of the well certification of that project will be, and all of the different knowledge domains that may come into play for certifying that project. And I think it's a good idea to understand in the context of a project how the synergies that I mentioned a few minutes ago between each of the domains work. So our project's under the early design stages. It's located in New York City, and this would be the GBRI Community Learning Center that was designed by one of our architects, Aparna. Thank you, Aparna, for the design, and she's a GBRI Sustainability Fellow. So what you can see here is the circular floor plan with an open to the sky courtyard in the center. And we could be covering that with a dome if we wish to later. You can see different functions in the building. And I think it's important to look at these functions because you have quiet spaces like a library. You have cafeterias, which are commercial, could be a commercial cafeteria. And that's going to be not a quiet space, but a busier space. You have lobbies, which are areas of transit between each of the sections or spaces. So you have to think about these in terms of lighting, access, egress, sound, loudness, ergonomics also is important. So there are many different knowledge domains that can be reviewed in the context of a project. And so our project has laboratories and classrooms on another level. And so those are also areas which need to have overlap with different concepts in the well domains. So you can see this is a fairly comprehensive example, multi-level, multifunctional, and there's green space on the exterior, there's green space on the roof. So there's a lot of features that should be looked at in a particular project. And you will get a project on your exam. So when we say our project, this is the project we're referring to, and I encourage you to visualize it when we are discussing it and mentioning it. And this helps you learn the concepts in the different knowledge domains under the context of a project, which you hopefully will remember and apply. Okay, so our project happens to be 25,000 square feet, and we'll have 25 full-time occupants. So those numbers, you don't need to remember those numbers, but they will be important to know for future slides that we discuss. And we'll talk more about the number of visitors and other details as we explore these knowledge domain features. So this is 25,000 square feet, 25 full-time occupants. Okay, let's move along and let's talk about well certification. So this section that we're discussing now is well certification. So you might ask, what is well certification if you're new to the well building standard? And if well equates to human health and well-being, then what's well certification? Well, let's look at it through the eyes of our project. So you have a project, which we just showed you. And well certification is a roadmap for organizations or teams looking to incorporate the best of the well building standard into their project or asset or location or group of projects in a portfolio. Or you could look at it as a roadmap to advancing human health and well-being in one or multiple projects. And I think my timing is on, so I'm going to go back to that and discuss that a little bit further. If you were to make a formula for well certification, it would look something like what you see on the screen. So you have a building or project, you apply the well building standard. And again, this is V2, Q4 2020 addendum, which Jeslin talked about. And my timing's getting away from me here. So I'm just going to go back if I need to. And then there's an implementation phase or phases, followed by which incorporates strategy from the well guidebook, and then finally documentation and performance verification. And the performance verification is done by a third party. So you see GBCI here, that is not our organization, that's the Green Business Certification Institute, and that's a third party that certifies or conducts verification that the well building standard criteria have been met. And that could be done through a lab or a contractor or an engineer. So here's a roadmap. And if you're looking for all of the elements we talked about on one slide, here it is. It's a high-level roadmap to well certification. So throughout this session, we're going to introduce you to several of these, which you can utilize to take additional notes if you wish to remember important concepts or tag roles on project team members. So there's something in the chat, a few things in the chat. Are we able to address those?
We're good, Doug. We're good.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to keep going. All right. So you may ask the question, why well, or why occupant wellness? Well, if you're a consultant, which some of us are, a sustainability consultant or a wellness consultant, this is something your clients may ask you. What is the rationale for well certification or occupant wellness? And that brings us to mind a quote from Winston Churchill, who said, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us." So that's an interesting quote. And why do we say that? Or why did Winston Churchill say that? Well, you consider that we spend about 90% of our time indoors. And so that could be sleeping, resting at home, in school, in our office, and restaurants. I mean, there are numerous places indoors where we spend a majority of our time, and considering it's about 90%. Buildings are everywhere. We cannot ignore them, and to a very good degree, they shape who we are. There's also the business case for well certification. So if you look at this particular slide, it's typical business operating costs. Mostly the cost is, in this case, the staff costs. People are responsible, or most of the costs are directed towards people. So this is from a study completed by the World Green Building Council, and it shows that staff costs such as salaries and benefits account for 90% of most business operational expenses. That's a huge percentage. And not only should people be seen as a key factor that makes a business great, but they're truly the assets to the company that if that significant amount of cash is directed at people, it's of the highest importance. Let's take a look at the well guide that Jeslin discussed a few minutes ago. And you may have already looked at the well building standard, but if not, let's see what it contains. And in the well V2 guidebook and the well building standard is a collection of research-based guidelines, strategies, preconditions, and these are spread across all of the well features, which are combinations of preconditions and optimizations. We'll talk a little bit more about what those are in the next slide. And so the well building standard, let's look at this in the context of the two different versions of the well building standard, V1 and V2. We're currently operating and training are test exam takers under V2, but V1, and I remember V1 taking the Well AP exam V1, there were 7 concepts, and those 7 concepts are listed across the top of the slide. And now with V2, we have added 3 more concepts. So there are 10 concepts now, and what was added, I think what you can see here is sound and materials and community were added to since V1 to V2. And you don't have to remember these concepts from V1, but you do need to know the concepts from V2. And that's in the embedded content PDF that Jeslin showed you. So you won't have to memorize them, but you will need to understand what they are, and that each of them have their own unique preconditions and optimizations. So we'll talk more about that next. So what are preconditions and what are optimizations? So if you're new to Well, each of the 10 concepts that you saw under V2 consists of features with distinct health-based intentions or intents. So features are either preconditions or optimizations. And so preconditions are mandatory. These are required, not optional, for Well certification. This is similar to prerequisites under the LEED rating system, mandatory for all project types. Optimizations, on the other hand, are optional pathways. And so optimizations, I'm going to go back to this, right? All right, briefly, okay. And optimizations are flexible, and like LEED credits that are worth points, optimizations are optional pathways for a project to meet certification requirements within Well. So project teams may select which optimizations to pursue, which parts to focus on within each optimization, for example. And so there are 24 preconditions required across the 10 concepts that we just showed you. And these are fundamental components of Well certified spaces and mandatory universal. They're not optional, they have to be met. Optimizations, there are far many more, and there's 84. These are optional pathways for projects to meet certification requirements and to meet different levels of certification, such as Well Bronze, Well Silver, Well Gold, and Well Platinum, which we'll also talk about in a few minutes. So preconditions are fundamental components of Well, 24 of them, and optimizations are optional pathways for projects to meet certification requirements. So Well operates on a point-based system for a project with 110 points available in each scorecard. And all the optimizations are weighted with different point values. And so there are a total of 84 of those optimizations. You don't have to memorize the point values of the optimizations. There are no points with preconditions because they're required. So that's something you should remember. But for optimizations, you'll see if you read deep into the Well guidebook V2 that each of the optimizations has a number of point levels that are associated with it. And you won't have to remember or memorize the point levels. Okay, very good. So let's take a look at an example. What's a precondition? Well, under the air concept, a smoke-free environment is a precondition, and that's mandatory. That's not an optional feature, and it's in order to deter smoking and minimize occupant exposure to secondhand smoke and reduce smoke pollution. This feature requires projects to ban indoor smoking. So it's an outright ban on indoor smoking, or restrict or ban outdoor smoking within the project boundaries. And you might see something like this on the exam. And you should remember that this is an important precondition under the air concept. And I'll talk more about that next Thursday for those that register for the course. And I'll be presenting the air concept and the water concept specifically next Thursday. But this is a mandatory component of the air concept, maintaining a smoke-free environment, and for obvious reasons. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide about how do we get projects certified under Well. Well, we're going to talk about that now. It's a roadmap. So now we have an idea of what a Well building standard is and what the features and preconditions and optimizations are, what some of the point rankings are, and the different levels of certification. How do you get your clients or your project Well certified? Well, we have to sign up. You need to register. Just like anything we need to do, we need to register something usually on a website, and well registration on the projects.wellcertified.com platform. That's the Well Digital platform, is the official registration application and the official documentation repository and project management system for Well. So once the registration has been paid and the invoice cleared, then the project is ready for Well certification. So let's take a look at the different stages of Well projects registration. I just talked about the first one, registering the project on the Well Digital platform, paying the fee. There's also a pre-certification pathway, and this is optional. And this allows project owners to demonstrate a commitment or an intent for health and wellness in the built environment. And that could be a valuable marketing tool for developers to market the proposed project as a well, in other words, it's intended to be well certified space. So that could be interesting or attractive to for tenants or to draw clients towards a building as a marketing initiative. And then there's performance verification. Again, pre-certification is optional, so you should remember that. Performance verification, projects need to pass performance verification to confirm that they actually are adhering to the well requirements in each of the concepts for water, for air, for example, for lighting, for sound, for nutrition. And then ultimately, projects that have satisfied all of those requirements. And those performance verifications, as I mentioned before, they're done by third party. That could be GBCI or contractors under GBCI or approved by GBCI. And then lastly, the projects are awarded a certification, and that might be well bronze, silver, gold, or platinum, depending upon the number of points earned. Okay, so let's start up with the project. We're going to walk you through the mock registration of a project on the Well Digital platform. And let's take a look at that. Registration requires submitting some basic information about the project and the scope. And so you need to initially, what's the name of your project? That could be the site or the building, the name of the owner. It's a name project that you enter, and it might be a nickname, for example, Acme Headquarters, Empire State Building, those are given here. And then we want to talk about the location. So what's the project location? So the project location, well boundaries of a project may not exclude portions of the building space or site to give the project an advantage in complying with the credit requirements. So the boundary needs, or the footprint of the project needs to be comprehensive in this case, and that needs to be defined at the registration stage. So here's the next slide, a single project could or may encompass multiple, let's go back to that, multiple distinct structures. For example, 3 buildings are shown here that are not physically connected, but provided all the following conditions are met. All the buildings are under the same ownership or management. The buildings must be located adjacent to each other. They don't have to be physically connected, but no land unaffiliated with the project intervening between the spaces or the buildings boundaries, and the project boundary must encompass all outdoor space associated or affiliated with the project. You look back to the ban of smoking on restrict of smoking smoke-free environment precondition under the air concept. One of the features of that was to either ban or restrict outdoor smoking. So that's project boundaries that are related to the project and can't be excluded under the well certification. So they need to be included. So the buildings must have some sort of relation to each other. The project name must accurately describe the group of buildings. And this is the pathway that allows the group of buildings to be treated as a single unit, from which we then need to do a project size calculation in square footage in aggregate for all the space that's being certified. And then documentation on the far right needs to be submitted for review at the same time, and performance verification by a third party must be conducted together. So the same set of features need to be applied to all the buildings. Now, it could be just one building for a well certification, and I think that's probably fairly common too, but this is one with multiple structures. Okay, so let's go on to registration, go through the process a little bit more. which version do we register our project for? We've been talking about V1, V2. So what you want to consider is that when you register a project, our project, for example, we registered under well V2. And the quarterly addenda version of well that was current upon enrollment was well V2 for our project. Now, a project can update to a newer addenda if they wish. So here's some of the options. You have well V1 and well V1 pilot, or well V2 and well V2 pilot. And let me just note that well V2 is for well core projects, and well V1 was intended for commercial and institutional offices, and pilots were for multifamily, residential, educational, retail, restaurant. So well V2 is a little more flexible, no specific project type with that. So projects can register under a specific project type or space, depending upon the use and intent of the building or the project itself. Okay, so well V2 really is more comprehensive, and it's designed to work with all types of buildings, commercial buildings, warehouses, hospitals, hotels, stadiums. And we know from our experience with the pandemic that no building was spared. So it makes the most sense to guard all buildings where we spend a good portion of our time. Again, 90% of our time spent indoors. So well V2 is the version that we use for our project in this example. And so we have here project details, next step along our registration process. And here are the space types. So you can see this checklist on the website, in the Well digital platform, of what is the space type that describes the project. So space types, what does that mean? Space types refer to spaces within a project, not the project as a whole. So a school, for example, might be made up of different space types: classrooms, offices, commercial kitchen, dining areas. So identifying space types can help clarify how the well features apply to that particular project. So identifying, right, for this project, we went ahead and we selected education, office, and library, because that is the GBRI space that you saw in New York City that I showed you as our project a few slides earlier. So those are the space types. There's office space, there's library for learning and education space, and training space. But what is the primary use of the project? Well, if you think about it, looking back at our project, the primary use is education. It's a training center. So we would check a primary use in addition to the multiple uses that you saw in the last few slides. So we are prompted in the application to select primary space. Okay, and what is the primary space? Well, primary spaces can apply to entire project, where secondary spaces are usually affiliated with the primary space in that case. And then we need to consider occupancy of that space. So what type of occupancy will occupy that space? So there's regularly occupied space or occupiable space. And so what's the difference? So regularly occupiable space on the left are areas inside the project where a particular individual normally spends at least one continuous hour, or cumulatively at least 2 hours per day. That could be offices, conference rooms, bedrooms, classrooms. And then occupiable spaces on the right are spaces that can be occupied for any task or any activity, including transition areas or balconies, for example, but they exclude spaces that are rarely accessed, such as storage spaces or equipment rooms. And then we need to understand who are the occupant types. And there are occupants, there are regular occupants, visitors to a site or building, employees, and eligible employees. And so you might ask, what is the difference of these? This is something that I'll just briefly go into. Occupants are anybody within the project boundary, and regular occupants are individuals who spend at least 30 hours per month on at least 5 days within the project boundary. So that could be employees, students, residents. Visitors are not regular occupants. That could be a shopper, a hotel guest, for example. And employees are individuals who work for the owner of the project within the project boundary. Could be maintenance, or could be front desk of a hotel. Eligible employees are any employees who qualify for benefits. So that might not be a contractor in that particular example. Okay, so there's the list of the hierarchy, I should say, of eligible employees. And there's quite a lot to look at there. Okay, well, you need to remember this. You should remember, what's the definition of an occupant, an employee, a visitor, a resident, and for your exam. Okay, we've been asked in the past, are there calculations on the exam? Yes, there are calculations on the exam. They're not too extensive. You do, if you take the exam at a Prometric Center, you do have an online calculator that you would use your mouse to actually call up the calculator and do the calculations. And mostly it involves square footage calculations, floor space calculations, or some division or multiplication to determine how many features should be present in a certain square footage or cubic footage of space in a facility. So there are some calculations. So we'll give you an example. So for example, feature V02, part 1 of the well building standard requires adjustable height workstations. And so this is in the ergonomics section for at least 25% of all workstations. Okay, so at least 25%. So if there are 21 total workstations in a project, then we want to apply that 25%. The required number of workstations is going to be 6. Okay, because 5 desks would be 23.8%. 5 divided by 21 is 23.8%. But the feature V02 part 1 requires at least 25%. So we use really the most expansive calculation here. We would round that up to 6 workstations. So you'll see this is a typical example of calculations on the exam. All right. Let me just skip ahead here to one of the last steps of registering the project is providing an estimated documentation date. When do you plan to submit the documentation to the well digital platform? And so that needs to be noted and submitted before the documents are submitted. So this is an estimate. You can update it at any point in time. And once we enter a future date, the registration setup's almost complete at that point. So we put in December 31st date in 2025, and this is an estimate. And after that, we're good to go. So we're now moving along to the certification cycle. And are we getting all the questions addressed still? Is there? Yes.
We are, Doug. You are good to continue on.
Okay.
Or if you want to take a break, I think we're good on time. If you need to take maybe a 5-minute break, we are 1 hour in right now. So
okay, yeah. Why don't we do that right now? Because we've covered quite a bit, and I think it would be great to take 5 minutes and then finish up. And if everyone's okay with that, so let's take 5 minutes. What it looks like right now, it is in 1 o'clock, right?
it's 1:01, yeah.
At 1:01 Eastern time in Boston, New York. So let's come back at 1:05 and regroup. And so 5 minutes, and we will get started again.
Sounds good.
Great. Hi.
Hey there.
Okay.
We lost your presentation, Doug. We see your desk.
Oh, all right. I will, no worries. I'll just reshare my screen. Okay. Were there some questions that anybody wanted to?
No, so far the questions we've just been asked if there's going to be a recording, if the handouts are going to be available, that sort of thing. So nothing technical they've been asking yet, just mainly about accessing the on-demand stuff.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to screen share mode. And you should be able to see the full screen, do you?
We see the presentation exactly like we should.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we were going to go through this, the stages. I think we already saw this, right? I hope that let's see, have I?
We did, yes.
Okay, we're right where we should be, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about performance verification. All right, and performance verification is required to conform that the well features have been met, and whether they are preconditions, which are mandatory and required, or optimizations, which are optional. So this performance verification occurs when documentation review is complete and the project is ready for this particular phase. So how often do we do this? I'm just going to move my screen around a little bit. So there are testing requirements within a certain time frame. Under well V1, it was within 5 years of the date of initial registration of the project. And well V2 is a little bit different. Well V2 and well V2 pilot within 5 years of the date of registration, or while the subscription is active, whichever is longer. So it's a little bit different than well V1. So these are performance testing requirements to confirm that the features have actually been addressed that were proposed in the well application. Okay, so we're getting close to completing the registration process. So we want to know, which certification is best for you or your client. And well V2 projects fall into one of two main groups, and that's determined primarily by ownership type. Is it owner occupied? The project's mainly occupied by the owner, or is it tenant occupied primarily? And the second program we have is well core and shell. So we have well certification and well core certification, and core and shell projects are treated differently than new and existing buildings and new and existing interiors. So let's take a look. All right, we said core certification. When the owner occupies a small portion of the project area, that would be less than or equal to 25%, is controlled by the building owner, then that would be an appropriate project to apply for core and shell registration. Okay, so that means 75% or more of the project space is occupied by tenants. So that's independent of the portion of building controlled by the owner. 100% of the building, core and shell, and all portions of the interior build out are managed by the project owner or included in the scope for design and operations. So this is getting a little deep into compliance, but you should know and understand the difference between core and shell certification versus well certification. Okay, so back to the program screen. So we selected, full scope well certification for our project. And we have one last question for our project, on the type of ownership. Are we planning to lease the space, or if we own and occupy the space, what do we want to select? So we selected the second option and own and occupy the space. And now we've registered our project. Again, this intent of this is just to walk you through how to register a project on the Well Digital platform and what the next steps are on the roadmap. So our next steps are to build a scorecard and enroll our project. And so enrolling the project includes making the payment as well. We've talked a little bit about paying fees and what they are. So what's the enrollment fee? Well, the enrollment fee, we said our GBRI community center was 25,000 square feet. So remember that number. So the enrollment fee is $2,500 US for every project, but the program fees depend on the square footage. So you may need to do a calculation on the exam to determine what the program fee is. So you would just multiply 26 cents US per square foot times the total square footage. So if you multiply that by 25,000, you get 6,500 USD. So add up the program fees, which is square footage based, plus the enrollment fee, which is a flat fee for every project, and we get $9,000. Okay. Then that's for our project. So they're going to vary depending upon square footage of the project, but minimum is 2,500 plus a program fee calculated based on square footage. And so you also see here on-site performance testing at the bottom, and that's required for all projects. So the fee that's listed here is for GBCI, the Green Business Certification, Green Building, I should say, Certification Institute conducts the on-site performance testing for this fee. So alternatively, projects can elect and contract with other performance testing agents, but they have to be approved by GBCI to perform the work. Okay, so here's some optional services that you see here. Pre-certification, again, that's optional. And if a project chooses to pre-certify, again, that could be for marketing advantages, to market the project as intended to be a well-certified building. Then the pre-certification fee is based on square footage as well. And it starts at 2,500 and it's capped at 25,000. So for our project, the pre-certification fee would be 2,500 and can be credited toward the overall program fee that we showed you of 6,500 in the last few slides. Okay, so then we have terms for payment, and the WELL scorecard that you see here is based on, if you look at ID and strategy, then these are, now we're starting getting into the preconditions, and you can see these are preconditions A01 for the air concept that I'll talk about next week as well too. So we have a weighting scale here, and then we have a checklist that says whether or not these are pursuing. So if it's a precondition, you have to pursue it. It's always going to be a yes. If it's, and for optimization, that's optional. It could be a maybe, a no, or a yes. This is not a final document. It could be changed. It's a checklist. And so it's really more of a planning document that you could view and analyze the likelihood of well features being met given the project's in good standing for any time or phase during the project. Okay. Okay, so then we'll talk a little bit about the different roles, and this will appear on the exam. So let's talk about the owner first. Who is the owner? It's an individual or entity that holds all legal rights to possess and control the project relevant location and to authorize decisions pertaining to the project location. A project administrator can act as a project manager and oversee the well process. So the project administrator is the primary point of contact on the project and must be copied on all correspondence with IWBI and GBCI. So this is a person who will also be the recipient of a comprehensive report from WELL following documentation review and performance verification, as well as the award package as to what level of certification the building has met or the structure has met. The project administrator can be a WELL AP, which is what you'll be sitting for the exam. It could be the owner, or it could be another designated representative of the project team. Then we have the WELL reviewer. So after documentation is submitted on the WELL digital platform, the Green Business Certification Inc., that's GBCI, will assign a WELL reviewer to the project. And the WELL reviewer is a third-party individual responsible for reviewing your project for certification. After submission for certification, the well reviewer is responsible for both documentation review and performance test results for compliance with well requirements. And then we have on the far right, the well performance testing agents or agents, and they conduct the performance test. That could be collecting a water sample, taking an air sample, measuring temperature or humidity, for example. And often those samples need to be sent to a lab for testing, a third-party laboratory, and then the results need to be submitted, of the lab reports need to be submitted for performance review by the well reviewer. So the well reviewer could be a consultant in this case that's reviewing the documentation. Okay, then there are some additional signatories associated with the project. And now we have folks like project team of architects, contractors, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, MEP engineers, and well APs themselves, well coaches, owners representatives, the rest of the team. So let's talk about the well AP because that's germane to what we're planning to prepare yourselves for passing the exam. So the well AP credential recognizes building industry professionals who are knowledgeable of the conceptual and applied frameworks of well and are experienced in its application. So well APs can be thought of as guides to help guide projects to successful certification awards, consultants essentially. Project teams are not required to include a well AP, but having a well AP as part of the project team will help to address all the necessary aspects of well, and it also qualifies projects for achievement of a pre-approved innovation feature. I think we'll talk a little bit about innovation features later, if not today, then later in the course, and can gain points for innovation points towards the well certification levels. And then we have well coaches and owners reps, contractors, so on and so forth. So I really wanted to spend most of that slide talking about the well AP's role because I think that's most important to you. Okay, so we have here's the checklist that we go through, and you'll notice here there are other certifications being pursued. Jeslin mentioned BRIAM, LEED. So now there's a streamlined process to combine well and LEED. And this is a new initiative. And I don't think we have a slide to present about that, but I think it would be useful to get our course registrants some information about this combined LEED and well streamlined registration process that was recently launched. Okay, so in addition to that, there may be other certifications being pursued, so those should be checked at this point. And many of these are complementary to well. Okay, so now we have Jeslin as our owner, in this case, our project administrator, and you see him on the Well Digital platform. And then we're going to fill in the roadmap with what we've seen right now. Is an enhanced roadmap requires more steps. And I think we're getting into a little bit of redundant content right now, but let's talk about documentation. So when we talk about documentation for well, you will need to know this for the exam. What's the difference between annotated documents, letters of assurance, and general documentation? And these are all uploaded to the Well Digital platform for review, and they can be uploaded as they're prepared. And the project administrator is expected to perform a quality check before submitting the documentation. And then documentation review begins once the payment has been made. So all documentation types can be uploaded digitally. Let's talk about the difference between these three. What's an annotated document versus a letter of assurance, for example, versus a general document? So annotated documents are existing project documents that are marked up to provide additional information to indicate how the well features have been met. So that could be design plans, design documents, construction documents, as-built drawings with information marked or highlighted, operations schedules, time logs, policy documents. That could be an employee handbook, for example, signage, communication materials, professional narratives, any other materials, including surveys, for example. Let me go back to that slide, and we'll go on to letters of assurance next. So letters of assurance, LOAs, these have to be submitted by the appropriate professional overseeing the implementation of a specific well feature. And that could be from architects, contractors, MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineers, the owner itself. And then general documents are tied to specific features that are not annotated or letters of assurance. Okay, we also have stages of documentation. There's 2 stages, and that could be intent and implementation. And we're going to talk about those further on the next slide, which is a table. And this table shows the different stages of intent and implementation and which types of documents are required when. And so this is a table, you would not have to memorize this table, but I think it's important to memorize the types of documents and the roles of the different team members in the certification process and who's responsible for submitting which types of documents, for example. We've seen the roadmap several times, and we've talked a little bit about some of these different stages. And so pre-design and pre-certification, we've discussed already, and we know that pre-certification is optional, but again, it's an intent to make a commitment from the owner of the property that the structure or building or project is going to apply for, well, gold or silver, for example, or platinum status. Okay, so it is optional. There's a fee associated with it, and that fee would be rolled into the program fee, as we talked about before. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time with pre-certification, but you should understand what it is. And then we're into the implementation, construction, design, and documentation. And I do want to talk a little bit about innovations and alternative adherence paths, because these will be on the exam. And you'll see the abbreviation AAP, which is an alternative adherence path. And so what is that? That's used when projects wish to deploy an alternative strategy other than the strategy that's suggested in the well V2 guidebook. And why would they do that? Well, they would do that to have some flexibility to meet the intent of the well feature without actually meeting it to the letter of the guidebook specification. And that might be done based on science or the latest research or a proposed feature that could be innovative, for example. And in that case, it would be an innovation feature. And that's when projects wish to receive credit under the well scorecard for pursuing intents and strategies that don't have a precedent in any of the existing well feature literature. Okay, so these allow for innovations, and AAPs allow for innovative alternative solutions for meeting requirements through the process, as long as they're supported by scientific, medical, or industry research. And they could be proposed for any requirement of well by submitting the AAP through the project dashboard on the well digital platform. And then we also have innovation features, which we just talked about. And those, again, have to be supported by scientific, medical, or industry research. And those are submitted for both well V1 and well V2 pilot. And they can receive up to, in version 1, up to 5 innovations, and up to version 2, up to 10 innovations. So there's a little more flexibility under V2. Then there's also equivalencies. So depending upon the location of the project, there might be local laws or regional regulations, codes, or references or programs that are more relevant than the reference in the well feature language. So in that case, IWBI accepts proposals for equivalencies, which may be used in place of the reference in the well standard. And those need to be established. Equivalencies should be established on closeness of technical requirements or closeness on the level of leadership demonstrated by compliance with the proposed equivalency compared to the level referenced in the well standard. So we're getting close to the end of the roadmap here. And now we're on to documentation review, and the well reviewer begins this review once the project submits all the design and protocol documentation, attesting to all conditions are in place, all features have been met that have been proposed, all preconditions have been met because they're mandatory, and any optimizations are proposed that are in place. And all projects need to pass documentation review. And the well reviewer begins this review once a project submits all the design and protocol documentation, attesting to the implementation stage, what's in place. Okay, now you may need to know and understand that after documentation is submitted, the well reviewer needs to respond with comments within 20 to 25 business days, indicating if the documentation is acceptable, if it's satisfactory, or if not, what additional information is needed. So 20 to 25 business days by the well reviewer to respond. And if any additional reviews are required, additional fees may apply. And additional rounds of review are also subjected to be completed within 20 to 25 business days. So I think you do need to remember the 20 to 25 business days for well reviewer turnaround, and any subsequent turnarounds for any changes and subsequent reviews. And then finally, we're into performance verification, which we've talked a little bit before. And so what is it? Well, those are tests, and they could be tests for air quality, water quality, lighting, acoustic compliance, in other words, decibel levels or echo or reverberation, or thermal comfort considerations such as temperature, humidity, and airspeed. And those testing requirements need to be completed and according to sampling protocols that GBRI sets based on the size and type of the project. And so there's usually a third-party laboratory involved, especially for things like water quality, for example, that would issue a report, and that would be the performance verification document that needs to be submitted. So you can see there's conditions that are necessary for submitting these documents, certain performance testing milestones, we should say, that are shown on this chart. And then we want to talk a little bit about who are the performance testing agents. So that this could be done by, I know this is a bit repetitive, but I think the repetition will drive it into your mind and help you memorize these points. That the performance testing agents are GBCI, Green Business Certification Institute itself, which is a third party, or it could be by other agents that are approved by GBCI. And that can be found a list on GBCI's website. Okay, we are getting very near the end, and the well report is reviewed by the well reviewer once the project submits all the design and protocol documentation that it attests to which conditions are in place, the implementation stage documents. And then from that, the outcome could be a curative action or an appeal. And that might be a consideration where some of the features are not adequately met. And so let's talk a little bit about this. So the well report outlines where the project might have failed the performance review criteria or failed other requirements. And so after the report is issued, the project owner has 180 calendar days to either accept the report or initiate curative action or file an appeal. So you will need to remember that 180 days following the receipt of the well report to either accept or take curative action or appeal. Okay, what's curative action? Well, that's available to the teams that wish to undertake some sort of corrective measure to address unmet performance testing criteria. And appeals can be made to contest the findings of the well report. And there, of course, are fees associated with those because they require more review and additional follow-up review by the well reviewers. Okay, so you will need to remember the 180-day time frame in that case. All right, let's move on. And the last one of the last slides in this section is the different levels of well certification. So I will just say right off the top that you do not need to remember these points, you should be familiar, of course, with bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And those are easy to remember, but the point rankings may not be so easy to remember. Well, the good news is you don't have to, because the embedded content on the exam will provide a graphic for you that you can call on demand by clicking a PDF to pop up while you're taking the exam, and it shows you the different levels of WELL certification and all the points that are associated. So each of these levels needs to have at least the number of points that's shown. Okay, and then after the award, there needs to be ongoing monitoring, of course, because this is health and wellness, and air quality needs to be continually compliant, or water quality needs to be continually compliant. So the WELL reviewer begins the review once the project submits all the documentation. And once the project is WELL certified, gold, silver, platinum, for example, or bronze, then from that point on, there are ongoing monitoring requirements, and annual submissions are required, as well as recertifications. So in order for the project to maintain the status as a WELL certified project, project teams need to report, and certain features need to be reported. Results of occupant surveys, for example, proof of maintenance, cleaning logs, filter replacements and HEPA filters, for example, ongoing monitoring of air and water, which I just mentioned. And these generally require submission to the WELL digital platform on an annual basis. So the annual basis is important to remember. That could be the water quality report, for example. And to remain in good standing, projects must submit the documents within 15 months of certification, and then every 12 months thereafter. And then that brings us to recertification. And to maintain certifications, projects must meet the reporting requirements for recertification. And certification itself is valid for 3 years. The project must file an application for recertification on the WELL digital platform no later than 3 years after the date on which the project was awarded its initial certification. And filing an application for recertification extends the validity of the project's original certification period for 12 months. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about WELL v2 pilot. And so WELL v2 pilot was drafted based on thousands of contributor contents and comments. And so I think that's probably on the next slide right here. Coming from 60 countries, more than 60 countries, with 6 rounds of review, coming down to a single vote to incorporate the pilot. I would say the pilot content from WELL v2 to finalize the WELL v2 building standard. So let's talk a little bit, in wrapping this up, about the holistic aspect of WELL. And so when we think about WELL and the WELL building standard, this is really an interesting graphic, because it's at the integration of policy, of design, and operations. It's sort of like a Venn diagram, if you can think of it that way, right? And at the center of it is, of course, people. And WELL is a flexible program, flexibility for your needs, your clients' needs. And so there can be optimization features to advance and gain more points. And again, some of them are optional, but all of the preconditions are mandatory. There can be alternative adherence paths, which we started to talk about, AAPs, to apply novel, new, creative ways of achieving WELL features and gaining points. And then the performance is verified by third-party, data-driven performance review, on-site assessment and testing lead up to performance verification. So WELL prioritizes accountability through this mechanism. And then this timeline is reasonably flexible as well. And usually the process is shown through here with typical timelines. and timelines for recertification and follow on and additional testing once the particular level of well certification has been met. So we've seen the process today, and I think you probably have a better understanding now of what is the registration process. How do we register a project on the Well Digital platform? What are the eligibility criteria, some of the timelines? What are the roles and responsibility of the team members and the Well AP's role in particular? What are some of the scoring levels for bronze, silver, gold, and platinum? Again, you don't have to remember the point thresholds. You can call that on the on-demand content PDF at any time. We talked a little bit about what is an AAP, it should say AAP on that slide, and what's an equivalency, and then pre-certification as being an optional step in the process, but more of a marketing approach to pre-certify the intent of a building that might be attractive to tenants, for example. And we haven't really talked a little bit about synergies, but we will in the next few sessions because there are synergies between, let's say, the air and thermal comfort feature, for example, relating to filtration of air or certain humidity and temperature controls. And then we'll talk a little bit more about innovations later in the discussion in subsequent sessions. Okay, so I think we have a little bit to talk about with the well portfolio. I'd like to try to wrap this up by in the next 10 minutes if I could, and then allow some time for questions. So does that sound good, Felicia?
That sure does, yes.
Okay, because it's about 1:40 right now. Okay, and so I think we are pretty much done with, yeah, we are. Actually, we can wrap it up sooner. So what I'm going to be talking about next week is the air and water concepts. So I think we have a discussion about homework and what's next, although I don't have a slide on that, Felicia. So I think perhaps it would be best if we just discussed that, or if you could find a slide for me.
Yeah, let me see. I might have it from my presentation
Okay.
that just earlier. Let me just double check.
Sure, I'll stop sharing. Meanwhile, Ben, Allison, Manuela, did you have any questions for me?
Not right now, no.
Okay. And where are you dialing in from? Where are you connecting from, Ben?
I'm in Iowa City, Iowa.
Okay. And what's your function relating to well building? Are you an architect, builder, engineer?
We're actually so Allison's on my team as well.
Okay.
Allison and I work for a company called Impact 7G.
Mm-hmm.
We're an environmental consulting firm that's actually has a proposal out for a well project, and so her and I are going through the Well AP course in order to become for our company to become a PTO. She's already got that PTA certification. So we need the third pillar, which is
Right.
the Well AP,
Okay.
in order to get going on that project. So
you're both pursuing the Well AP designation.
Correct.
Okay. How about Manuela? Any comment from Manuela about what your interest is in Well AP certification or job function or role? Well, if you wish to type it, that's fine too. All right, so here is the, so you're sharing your screen, Felicia, about the homework and what's next?
I am, yeah. So once you have enrolled, these are all items that you would have access to directly from our portal. And so this just kind of covers the things that we want you to do before next week's session if you do decide to make that commitment. And so there is a little bit of reading, and there will be reading with each week. The good thing about this is, though, that we do have a highlighted guidebook for you to reference. And so in your account, there would be the original version of the guide as well as a highlighted version. And that highlighted version, we have gone through, highlighted all of the extra important information. So as you're going through and reading, you can pay special attention to that, kind of help you to remember the things that are actually important. So each week you will read, here are the things that we recommend you go through, which is the well certification guide, about 28 pages. You have the well portfolio guide, which is about 27 pages. And then pages 2 through 10 of this well version 2, the next version of the well building standard guide. And this is the version right here that we will actually have highlighted for you to reference. So.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Yeah, thanks, Felicia. Yeah, so there's a few other things here. The study buddy. So that was very helpful to me when I was studying for the WELL AP exam, and that's something that we can help facilitate for you on our WhatsApp group that you would join once you enroll in the course officially. And my study buddy was Carolina, who was actually, and Lisa Silver too, who Carolina was on the call earlier. And that's really important because it's motivational, and also you can bounce ideas along over that person to have discussions. And then you can always ask us, the faculty, questions on the WhatsApp chat site. And since we have people in Dubai and Texas and Boston, you know, we have people in a lot of different time zones. So if you're asking a question, you know, late at night, it might get answered before, you know, we wake up in Boston or New York, right? So that's a benefit too. And I think the pre-reading is important before you come into the next class. And then as you see, your homework for next week, after we conclude next week's session, will be to take the practice exams for each of the concepts. And the practice exams are really helpful. And those are generated by GBRI, and they're similar to, but not exactly identical to, the exam questions, but they're very helpful in framing important concepts and questions that you should know. They're multiple choice, and we provide the answer key as well, and explanation as to why the answer that you selected, if it's correct, was correct versus other answers which would not be correct. And so that's important to master those practice exams. And once you do that, then for all of the 10 concepts, then you're ready to take the mock exams at the end of the course. And the mock exams, there are 3 different mock exams, and those are very similar in their structure to the actual WELL AP exam. They are not identical questions that you find on the WELL AP exam, but they're very similar, and they're very helpful. And your goal should be to get 100% correct on the content exams, because you can go back and look at the correct answer if you have something wrong, and you can retake them. And then to get at least a 90% on the mock exams, which are more comprehensive at the end of the course. And then if you can do that, you'll be ready to sit for the actual exam, and you'll, I would imagine, be very successful. We had another chat. Oh, I think that's something you put in there, Felicia, right?
Yep, I was just sharing the link. So if you are interested in more information, we have that listed there. And I also wanted to note that is the same link that we will actually add the recording from today's session. So just give us about 24 hours and that will be available there as well.
Great. Okay, Manuela, Ben, any other questions? I think we're pretty much wrapping up for today.
Just one quick thing here. So the WELL certification guide and the portfolio guide, when I registered for the exam, I bought like the exam preparation bundle. I think those came in that already. Is that track, or are the documents that I see on the screen here, are those different?
No, so these would be the documents from IWBI. So if you had purchased directly from them, you may have received those as well.
Okay.
I think maybe I could share something with Ben and Manuela. So Felicia mentioned, hold on, Felicia mentioned the highlighted guide. And so that's, let me see if I can do that.
You want me to pull that up, Doug? I can.
I
pull
know
that up.
I have it.
Okay.
I'm just trying to screen share here. Yeah, so, here's just an example, okay? So what we give you is a document, and this is a 373-page PDF. However, what we've highlighted are the most important points for you to review and potentially memorize, or at least understand in more depth than the rest of the other points in the document. So these are based on recent exam takers' feedback. So this one is manage pollute. This is an option in this case under, it looks like it's probably under air, right? So you can see there's highlighted content, and that's the most important content that you should know and recall. And if you are getting this, just the document from IWBI, for example, or a third party, they're not going to have it highlighted for you. So this is a lot of work on our part to highlight important concepts that you need to know and need to be prepared for the exam. And this was a key document for me to review when I was ready to take the exam. Okay. But we do it for you in terms of highlighting those concepts.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Great. Manuela, do you have any questions, comments?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, I was just curious what your role is with WELL. Are you a builder, architect, consultant, engineer?
I'm an architect.
Great.
I did sign up for WELL multiple times, never got the chance to really dig into the materials to study. And I keep telling myself I'm going to do it this time.
Great. Well, I hope you will officially, if you haven't already, sign up for the course. And I'll be teaching the next session next Thursday, and I'll cover air and water. So we're going to really focus on two important concepts from which I think we had about 20 questions, right, on the exam from air and water combined. So that'll be the focus of next Thursday's session. And if you're going to attend that, and if you're a paid registrant, then you should do a little bit of pre-reading on that so you're prepared for it. But I'll give you the full synopsis and summary and all the important points. And I will say this much, that those are areas of my own personal expertise in air quality monitoring and modeling, and also water quality sampling and testing, and have been areas of work that I have been involved in as an environmental and civil engineer for more than 30 years now.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any last questions for administrative questions for Felicia?
Nope.
Nope. Thank you both.
Okay, I think we're good, Felicia, right?
Yep, I think
Shall
we're
we
good.
conclude?
We surely can.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks a
Bye. You
lot.
as well. Bye.
Bye.